Sometimes these rooms can get a little crowded, but I just wanted to say hello. So welcome everyone, and we're excited to have you.
I'm sorry, I had not started the recording. So we are in the SWAN Acquisitions Users Group. I'm
We
Vicki
are.
Cotton, and
I'm Sam Deedle,
we are
co-chairs.
co-chairs. Yay!
Okay, well, I guess that's welcome and introductions. Just in case anyone missed it, what we said a little bit earlier is if as you come in, and people may filter in and out throughout this meeting, we will mute you by default, but this isn't too big of a group, so we want you to feel comfortable to use your microphones if you have them. So please unmute yourself, feel free to talk, feel free to ask questions and interrupt, and try to replicate an in-person meeting as much as possible with this interface. So, and you can also, of course, enter things into the chat at any time, and we'll keep an eye on that. That's part of the beauty of having co-chairs, I think. So Vicki, I think, are you sharing your screen?
I
You are.
am.
Okay.
Yes.
So we did prepare a small PowerPoint for you, which will be available on the SWAN support site as a packet to this meeting. And we want to just jump right into that first agenda topic, which was, I think I lost your screen.
Oh no.
Maybe it's just me.
Is everyone able to see my screen? Is
No.
anyone
Okay,
able
Amy's
to?
shaking her head.
Oh,
We
why?
lost it.
Oh my goodness.
I can share mine if you're having trouble.
I'm not sure why it did that. It only went out when I started sharing, when I started the slideshow.
Oh, it probably popped into, are you sharing one screen? Sometimes that pops
Yeah,
it into a different screen.
I am.
That might be what it is.
Well, of course I mess it up, right? If that's not there. So let's see if and I've
It
lost my
wouldn't be a
control.
go-to meeting without a couple small gaffes.
Very true, especially if I'm presenting. And that's the wrong screen to share.
Okay, I can see not the slideshow, but I can see the PowerPoint.
Okay. This is absolutely crazy. So if I start it now. Nope, you're still seeing the other one. Okay.
Yep. Here, let me.
And I'm in the IT team. This is terrible.
It's okay.
Okay.
Oh, wait, we saw it for a minute.
Really, I just ended it. Oh no.
Oh, okay. You know what? I might have just popped in and out when you ended it. If you want, I can.
Oh,
Yeah, we can
there
see
you
it.
go.
Okay.
Okay. Oh,
We were just giving time for other people to show up.
that's
That's all it
right.
was.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the first agenda item is just a small reminder, which most of you don't need, but we wanted to place it here anyway. A while back, well, a long time ago, we didn't have a sort of set fields and subfields for notes for your order line to be mapped to. And so there was a little bit of a free-for-all, and some people were putting them in the 946, some people were putting them in the 977 with that pre-cat note. And we moved sometime, I believe, last year to asking that everyone put their notes in the 947 subfield N. And this is just a reminder, just to make sure everyone's doing that. So if you have a moment, double check with your vendors, make sure that you're putting your notes there. And like I said, I think 99% of you are already doing this. This is just a reminder. So if you are a library that finds that you're mapping a note to a 977 or a 946 or any other field that is not the 947, some field N, you'll first need to configure that change with your vendor so they can map the notes appropriately on their end. And then you'll need to configure in Symphony with that load bibs with order info or bib order load report to read the notes from the correct field. So Vicki, if you could click on the next slide. She's being my Vanna today. And I'm not seeing it advance. Okay, beautiful. So this is what that looks like. So if you did have to change your settings with your vendor and remap those notes, in addition to setting it on the vendor's side, you then of course want to update that load bibs with order info report, which is also the bib order load. And this is what that would look like in that order options tab down toward the bottom, outlined in blue, that mark tag number 947 subfield N and the entry ID of note means that it'll read a note from that subfield. So yeah, that's just a little reminder. If, of course, as always, as we go through these things, if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or enter questions into the chat. And I think that is that for agenda item 1. On to you, Vicky.
It appears that there's a bit of a lag, so I did advance it. The
No
next
worries.
thing on our agenda is to talk about the Remove Fiscal Cycle report that has been going on for 17,000 years. The first few fiscal cycles came out without an issue, and then, just in case you need a reminder of what it is, we are removing those older fiscal cycles because we don't need to keep all of the old information, and it's just kind of a clutter. And if orders are not complete or considered closed, then we're not able to remove items. So we had Cersei Dynex create this report for us, and everything seemed to be working. And then when we got to fiscal cycle 2016, we just kept getting a lot of errors. And once we finally got through most of them and fixed what the issues were, we were stuck on this where it's saying that there were no invoices, but yet there were still these orders that were attached to invoices. So what we finally have figured out is when you are doing your rollover and you're moving to the new fiscal cycle, when you are bringing in your new invoices and you're creating them, and this invoice was created in fiscal cycle 2017. So the BookX 12 invoice report was run, and this new fiscal cycle was updated. However, these lines are attached to the old fiscal cycle, and that is why we haven't been able to remove them. I have blurred to protect the innocent. You have done nothing wrong with this, especially we were still learning. So we wanted to bring this to your attention as you do your rollover and you are bringing in your invoices. What may be happening as well is these lines may be filled in. However, these may be the blank lines that you see on your invoice because it is from the old fiscal cycle. And then you have to search and link to the order. So when you're doing your search, these are still the 2016 orders. And the reason they had not been removed when we ran the remove selected order line report for you is because they weren't rolled over. And I think that what is mostly happening with that is we had used the Cersei Dynex rollover suggestions, and we were having everyone follow along with that. And part of that report is to have all the order lines for received, loaded, paid, and invoiced be equal 0. So what happened with these is that these were received at the time that the rollover took place, so these orders didn't roll over. So we're working on reports that you can run before you do your rollover to see if you have any orders like that, so that you make sure that those orders get rolled over as well and you can pay them in the new fiscal cycle. Does that make sense to everyone, or is it all completely mud?
So you want us to inform you before we do the rollovers so you can run this report for us?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, we're creating this report in BCA. It is in, you'll be able to to run it yourself. We already have one there that is for looking for orders that are received and paid but not loaded, and that's a really good cleanup report. So just a shout out for that report if you haven't been running it, because not loading the order is what Circe Dynex looks at as that being an open order. And that's another reason why items can't be deleted, because there's an open order on the title. So that report already exists in there. I started working with another report that will give you received but not loaded or paid, loaded, paid, or invoiced. And I did put that there, and then when I ran it again, I noticed that there's something odd with it. I just need to work with Sam, because she's much better at BCA than I am, to see what I did wrong. So that report will give you these, and we might want to just look at any variation for that rollover report to look for orders that have been paid but not received, and or loaded, just so that you can make sure that before you do your rollover, you're absolutely sure what needs to be rolled over, and then you just run multiple reports to roll over. Did that answer your question, Amy? Or did it answer it too well?
When I go to do my fiscal rollover, I'll probably be talking to you.
Definitely. And I know we've got one coming up. It's not that soon, but I definitely recommend that if you're able to, start looking at your orders now rather than waiting till, say, the beginning of December, so that you make sure that you can do as much cleanup now as possible, and then you're not scrambling when you're doing your fiscal rollover in January. And definitely, if you have any questions, if you start looking at things and things just don't seem right, absolutely open a ticket, help at swanlibraries.net. And Kelly, I'm very happy to talk with everyone. Okay.
Rollover is Vicky's favorite.
It is. It's right up there with statistics. So um, does anybody have any more questions about the fiscal cycle removal? Okay.
All right. Well, there was a question before I move on to item type consolidation. Mary had a question. What types of notes do people put in the 947 subfield N? And that is a good question. It does vary by library. Sometimes it's a selector note. It's something that is always going to mean something internally to that library. So it might be something that identifies that cart. It might be something that has to happen to that specific title when it comes in. Does anyone who uses notes want to speak to that? How do you use your notes in your library for your order lines?
At Woodridge, we put in like our selector notes if there's reserves or an added copy, or if it's going to a special collection or something like that.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I think that's pretty typical. If anyone else wants to jump in, please feel free. Like I said, I know it's a little awkward being digital and remote, but this is an open forum, so we want you to chat as much as you like. All right, any other questions? I'll keep an eye on the chat. But otherwise, let's keep this rolling. Okay, so I've been doing updates on item type consolidation in a lot of meetings lately, so it went back, Vicki. I saw it advance and then go back.
Okay.
That was your op.
Yep, I'm sorry. Mute.
So some of you might have heard this already before, so please bear with me. But for those of you that haven't, I will start at the beginning. So a while back, well, actually for a very long time, pretty much since the history of time, we have been trying to cut down on item types in SWAN for a couple reasons. The main one is that in a large consortium, the larger the list of item types grows, the more complicated things are for patrons and catalogers. And some people ask, why is it complicated for patrons? And that is usually, or if not always, having to do with interlibrary loan. So if you receive an item in from another library that uses an item type that you do not use, most often that item type is going to check out to your default circulation rule. So it'll circulate unexpectedly. And so your patron may get a different fine rate, they may get a different loan period, they might get confused about that. So it's always best to have a smaller list of item types for that reason and for the ease of staff and just to make the catalog cleaner. We're always interested in data cleanup, streamlining things, having things as clear and concise as possible. So that's the historical reason behind this project, but we've really ramped it up this year. And our first leg of this project was to look at video item types. We have, if I added all those up, which I'll actually do right now, bear with me. Okay, no, I won't. It's just too much, but it's under 40, but more than 30. We'll say that. So there are a lot of, and I think 37, maybe 38 video item types in existence right now in SWAN. Some of these are being used extensively, some are not being used much at all. So our first step was to look at which item types in this sort of video group were used the least often. And we did reach out to some libraries, so you might have one that was reached out to, and we suggested you move an item type to a different one, and some of you were easily able to do that, and some it was a little more complicated because, as you all I'm sure know, item types drive circulation in Symphony. They also drive holdability in Symphony. So changing an item type isn't as simple as just recataloging an item. It also, of course, involves maybe possibly restructuring your circulation or hold rules, and it also involves reports and statistics. So it can be a larger thing to consider, but we have been looking at these video item types, and what we learned was that 90%, or if not 99% across the consortium, Blu-ray and DVD were circulating the same. And so we came up with a new model for item types for video that is using the terminology of video as opposed to Blu-ray or DVD. And so I made this table for you to see how the idea or the rationale behind how these are, which item types are absorbed by the new item types. So for example, let me just run through an example here. We have created a basic video item type that in theory would absorb the item types of Blu-ray, Blu-ray_J, Blu-ray_MAT, which stands for mature, which no one is really using anyway, DVD, DVD-J, DVD mature, and video cassette. Okay, and so on and so forth down the line. So we've established this new terminology of video as a sort of broader bucket item type. And we have brought in the new SWAN 100 using this model. So they will be live with this when they come in. That's Warrenville, Roselle, and Glenside. When they come into SWAN, they will be using this automatically. And we've also had interest from other libraries that have heard this rundown, and they have requested consultation. So as of right now, we have, including the SWAN 100, because I will include them, we have 5 libraries, which is 5% of our libraries currently using this model. We also have another 2 that are about to be using this model. So it is gaining some momentum, and we are excited about it. And so we've therefore decided to expand it. If Vicki, if you could expand, move to the next slide, please.
And it is nice that we're 100 now so that we can very easily figure out our percentages.
Percentage, yes, exactly. And so the next leg of this, we're thinking of looking at, eventually we want to tackle all of our item types, right? We want to look at every single group of sort of video versus audio versus et cetera, and get that as pared down as possible. So the next step would be to look at audio. And this is what we're looking at. And I did mark this as pending, still under consideration, and potential item types, because these aren't set in stone yet, but this is the direction we're thinking of moving toward. So we're thinking of it just like video, creating a new item type called audio, and then audio new, and then audio book, and audio book new. And in that existing item type column, you'll see the item types that would potentially be absorbed by the new item type. And this, in most cases for you, would be even simpler, and by you, I mean libraries in general, would be even simpler than the video item type project, because I think from what I've seen, and I've done a fair bit of analysis of everyone's circulation and hold maps across the entire consortium to see how things circulate, to identify potential areas that might be an issue. What I found when examining the audio item types was that most libraries circulate all of these, for example, audio cassette, CD audio J, etc., pretty similarly across the consortium. So this might be an even easier opportunity for consolidation for you. But this is the kind of model that we'd be looking at for audio. And continuing forth down the line, I think the next thing we'd want to tackle would be equipment, and we'd be looking at all of that. We also have the library of things. So this is by no means a project with a definite timeline. It is not something that is mandated. It is not something that we are telling people you have to move to this model tomorrow or at any specific date. It's something that we are exploring and offering, and some libraries have been very excited to consolidate their rules. So we want to mention that. If you go to the next slide, Vicki, please. Okay, so the next step is, if you've heard this and you are just curious about a consultation, the next step is to send a ticket to help@swanlibraries.net. And during this consultation, we'll do a bunch of things. First of all, we will run reports on your items that you currently use, all the item types you use. We will examine how each circulates. We'll come prepared to the meeting for that, so that we can identify for you areas that might be an easy transition and might be more difficult. Another huge piece of this is statistics, and that's one of the biggest things I've heard from libraries that are interested in moving to this model. They have no objection to it circulation-wise, but they're concerned about losing circ stats or collection reports or that kind of thing. So we would analyze all of that with you. We would go through all of that with you and see if it's a potential move for you, or if you'd be losing any kind of critical information or functionality that you may need, because we want to simplify things, not make things more complicated. So if you are unsure if you are a candidate for this, you can still send in a ticket. If we meet and we determine that this is not a great move for you at this time, which has happened, that's completely fine. But we can at least have that conversation with you and identify some possible things that we can do for you. I mean, even if we don't move you to this new item type model, a constructive thing that's come out of these meetings is identifying areas for cleanup. So we will run a shelf list by item type and home location for you, so you can see if there is an old item type out there that you aren't even using anymore, things like that. We can clean things up in your collection, make suggestions, and we can also clean up that item type dropdown. Sometimes we see that there is an item type that you don't even use that has been cataloged by someone in your library, and usually that is the result of a mistake by a cataloger. It's just a simple, maybe they clicked on the drop down and hit the down key one too many times, and it selected an item type you don't even use. And that might be because it's in your drop down and it shouldn't be. So we can even do that for you. So there's really no harm in requesting one, should you be interested. And yeah, that's pretty much what I have here. I see a question from Kelly. Does this replace item type groups that were talked about for circ limits? Were those groups ever implemented? No, it does not replace any sort of item type groups. And I think what you might be referring to, Kelly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the circulation map in a previous upgrade allowed us to group item types under a single circulation rule. And that allowed us to simplify the circulation map. Those limits that are in the circ rules still apply per item type. The only other way to customize that would be to limit across the entire consortium, which of course we would not do. So if we were a standalone, we could say, okay, in this circulation rule, only allow 5 CDs, but that would be across the entire consortium, which we aren't going to do. So just because we can group those circ lines in those lines in the circulation map doesn't mean that those limits are applied differently. Hopefully that makes sense. You're welcome, Kelly. So yeah, Vicki, you've been involved in some of these meetings because we've also rolled them into fine-free consultations. Do you have anything to add?
I think that for the meetings that we've had, a lot of the libraries have been surprised when they see some of the items that are still out there. And
Yeah.
and some of these libraries are definitely libraries that have done a really great job of keeping a nice clean database. So it's not any it's not that your library is doing things badly. That's
Right.
not even the way it's just kind of the nature of the beast with databases. There's always going to be something that can be cleaned up, and we're more than happy to help you with that. But yeah, from the libraries that we've spoken with, there's been a lot of excitement about it. So everyone's very happy with being able to streamline their circ map
Yeah, absolutely.
and their items. And that first item, the drop down for the item types, that was very exciting. We can do it right as we're in the meeting. You
It's
get
true. Yeah.
to see
And
behind the
there was
scenes.
exactly, you can see into configuration just for a brief exciting moment. We did in one library, I believe we removed close to 30 item types they weren't using. So you might have clutter in your dropdown that you're not even aware of. And I should say too that if you're interested in that part, but you know for sure this item type consolidation effort isn't something you necessarily are interested in yet, you can even send in a ticket and say, hey, I heard I can update my item type dropdown and clean that up, and I'm interested in doing that, and we can help you with just that piece as well. So feel free to send in a ticket and start that conversation. Not to put anybody on the spot, but I do know we have at least one or two libraries in this room, people from libraries in this room, I should say, that went through this process. If anyone wants to speak, please feel free. And of course, you don't have to if you don't want to. Okay.
They're just not talkers like you and me, Sam, I guess.
That's okay. That is perfectly fine.
Oh, we'll see. Lucas did put it in the
Lucas
chat.
says it was great. Okay. Thank you, Lucas. So, all right. I know that isn't 100% acquisitions related, but it is item related. So I wanted to make sure I covered that in this meeting, just like we've covered it in cataloging and circulation and all the others. Lucas also says, I would highly recommend that you at least do the drop-down cleanup if nothing else. Thank you. Yes, I do feel that that is really useful, and you might be surprised at how useful it could be to you. So think about it. Take a look at that drop-down when you leave this meeting and see if there's any clutter in there that you may not need, and we'd be happy to clean it up for you. Okay. So moving right along, I mean, feel free to continue to discuss this in the chat or chime in if you like. We do have a pretty small agenda, so we're actually on one of the last agenda items, but I wanted to go over Blue Cloud acquisitions. And at this point, I think I'm going to take the presenter role.
Okay. You should be
Well,
able to
no,
just
let me
take
cover
it,
the
right?
slide first.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll
All
steal it from you in a
right.
minute.
Okay, good.
Okay. So you've heard us talk about Blue Cloud acquisitions for a long time. We did a pilot program last year with LaGrange and St. Charles that we felt was pretty successful, and I think they learned a lot, and we certainly did. We've participated in some meetings with Cersei Dynex to urge them to develop certain features that we identified as critical, such as Edifact, EDI, but they use Edifact in Blue Cloud acquisitions, and other things that we've emphasized are important. And they've made some good strides in the right direction for us, and there's still some areas that are awaiting development. But this is where we are with this product. So Edifact was enabled for both ordering and invoicing recently, which is really exciting. And we have been, you might have heard, at SWAN, we've been working in Blue Cloud acquisitions on production. We have created well, we've always had a vendor account with Baker and Taylor, but we've created some grids within their Title Source 360, and we've started ordering titles for a floating collection to fill, to order extra copies of high demand titles that can fill holds across SWAN, so they're holdable to everybody. And the intent is for them to circulate across the consortium, continuing to fill holds until those holds queues are exhausted. And then we would send them back to Baker and Taylor or decide what to do with them. So it's a rental collection.
Has
So,
anyone, I'm sorry, I just
oh
have
yeah,
to interrupt, Sam, you know
no,
me.
please.
Has anyone seen any of our copies come in yet to fill a hold for your patron?
Yeah, I'm curious
Might
too.
be a better question for CERC, but we do have some that are CERC and tech here, so
Right. If you haven't, you will.
yes.
We just started ordering in August, end of August, I believe. Yes.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Okay. I guess I was telepathically asking him to chime in and confirm that I was correct.
He's
So
good that way.
yeah, we started ordering at the end of August, so it is still pretty new, but you will be seeing these titles, and of course the intent is just to supplement across the consortium and fill those holes as quickly as possible. So hopefully that will be a benefit to your patrons. So as part of this project, we've also been testing out Blue Cloud Acquisitions, is why I'm mentioning it here. And it's allowed us to begin to test Edifact. And so we've actually been able to submit an order to Baker and Taylor, and they received it. I want to mention something really quickly here. Well, yes. First, I want to say that the SWAN 100, the 3 new libraries, Warrenville, Glenside, and Roselle, are going to be coming into SWAN with training on Blue Cloud Acquisitions in production. So they will be using the product. To the extent may vary depending on the library, but they're all going to receive training. They're all going to be using it to some extent. And I do want to mention that at some point, we envision transitioning Symphony libraries onto Blue Cloud Acquisitions. That will be at some point because there are still some areas that are awaiting development. One of them is multi-line purchase orders. So right now in Blue Cloud Acquisitions, every single title is its own purchase order. And this is actually very similar to the way it was, if anyone remembers III. But
Thank you for
I know,
not
Vicky
saying
just
that
gasped.
word. Thank you.
Yeah, I felt the horror from
Yes.
you. So they use single line purchase orders, which for some vendors causes some incompatibility issues. Specifically, Ingram will not accept any Edifact orders that are single line purchase orders. So if you are a library that uses EDI with Ingram, this might be an issue for you, or this will be an issue for you until Blue Cloud Acquisitions allows multi-line purchase orders. This is an issue that Certidynamics is well aware of, is working on. I don't have a specific timeline for when they will be enabling the new feature for multi-line purchase orders, but I can tell you it is definitely in the works. We've had multiple meetings with Mike Hilmo, who's sort of in charge of this project, and he's assured us that he's well aware. But he's also very transparent about the things that just aren't ready yet, because we want to make sure that we don't move anyone to a product that is not ready to fully sustain them. So in addition to the multi-line purchase orders, manual invoices are not yet allowed. So the only way to create an invoice in Blue Cloud Acquisitions is through Edifact. So in some ways, this is sort of nice for your Edifact or your EDI vendors, right? Because you don't want to hand key anything anyway. But for those vendors such as Amazon and things like that, that you can't receive an EDI invoice, that is still going to be a roadblock. So there's a possibility that there might be a hybrid environment where some vendors could be accommodated in Blue Cloud Acquisitions, but not in Symphony. But some in Symphony and not in Blue Cloud Acquisitions, excuse me. And then order cancellations are still. Yeah, I'm going to address it.
Single line. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Feel free to answer it if you know the answer. But I will get to it in just a second. That's actually why I stuttered a moment. I'm looking at too many things. So another area that's still waiting development is order cancellations. And Anne Marie asks, single line purchase orders will work with Midwest, and the answer is yes. And right now, the only main vendor that we've identified, and by that I mean like the large ones that our SWAN libraries use, is Ingram, that is incompatible. Midwest and Baker and Taylor are definitely vendors that Cersei Dynix has tested and been able to work with success. So that's a good question. Okay. Any questions about all of that I just threw at you before I go in and actually display the product? I want to show you what it actually looks like.
So with the manual invoices, if you're using Blue Cloud, can you then go to workflows, add your invoices there, and will they kind of go together, or you won't be able to use workflows at all if you're using Blue Cloud?
That's a really good question, Amy, and thank you. I'm glad you asked, because that's something I definitely want to clarify. So the two, I guess the two interfaces do not speak to one another as far as acquisitions data is concerned. They're 100% separate. Think of them as living alongside each other, but never, communicating. So what it would look like, what a hybrid environment would look like, would be I use Blue Cloud acquisitions for Baker and Taylor and Midwest Tape, and I still use Symphony for Ingram. You wouldn't be able to enter an invoice in Symphony and then somehow push it into Blue Cloud acquisitions in any way. They would have to be completely separate. The only time that Blue Cloud acquisitions communicates to the Symphony server at all is for item record creation. So when you create an order in Blue Cloud acquisitions, and I'll kind of show you that what that sort of looks like in a minute, but when you create an order, you can click a button that creates an on order item in workflows so that your patrons can see that it's on order. And then the same thing when it's received, where you can actually put in a barcode and all of that. It communicates with Symphony via web services, just like Enterprise does. It doesn't actually communicate any acquisitions data. So all of that order info, fund information, vendors, everything is 100% outside of Symphony. So it's sort of a different way of thinking of it.
Which also means it won't block item removal, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yay!
So once every single feature is added, this is going to be honestly a thing of beauty. First of all, like Vicky said, there will be no such thing as open orders on this title cannot remove. That will not exist, because the orders will not even be in Symphony. They will all be in Blue Cloud acquisitions. Your on order item records and all of that, and your actual cataloged item records will still be in Symphony as they should be. But all of that acquisitions order information will be housed outside. In addition, that means that there's no more waiting in report queues. So there are a lot of really exciting features involved with Blue Cloud acquisitions, and they are doing tons of development with it all along. I mean, we were pretty impressed with how quickly they were able to implement Edifact. So if that's any indication, there's an exciting future with this product. Real quick, before I move on to the demo, I do want to say that eventually, when you do move toward using this product, notice that I said Edifact, not EDI. It's a different protocol. So if you were tomorrow to be switching to Blue Cloud acquisitions with Baker and Taylor, for example, you would have to notify them of the change, because the information for the orders will come in a different format. It'll be Edifact, not X12, which is what Symphony uses. So that's just something that we would walk you through at that time. It's just a slight change, and they're able to accommodate it, but it's a different system, so it's a different data protocol. Any other questions about that before I show you what it looks like? Okay. All right, Vicki, I'm going to steal the reins from you.
Steal it.
Just take me a quick moment. know what? I don't know if it's going to let me make myself presenter.
Okay.
Do you mind tossing me in there?
Are
I'm
you
not an
wearing your
organizer, that's
seatbelt?
why.
You are now presenter. Oh, I have to click yes.
Thank you.
You're very
Okay.
welcome. Thank you.
Oh, we're so nice to one another. Okay. All right, you should all be seeing my screen, and it should look purple with some stuff in the middle.
I see it.
Oh, thank you. Okay. All right. So if you were to log into Blue Cloud Central, which is where all of the Blue Cloud products are housed, it would look something like this. It would vary depending on what your login allows you, which modules or areas your login allows you to access. But since we're talking acquisitions, I'm going to go ahead and click on acquisitions here. And I think we demoed this a really long time ago, sometime last year, so some of this might look a little familiar, but we want to show you what it looks like once again, since we're moving closer and closer to using this product. So the first default screen that this will open will be your ordering screen, because most of the things you do in acquisitions will be ordering, but that is by no means the all you can do here. I want to walk you through some of these buttons and see what they do. So access vendor portals, if I am to click this, depending on how many vendors I have configured in my acquisition setup, I click that again, it will list them here. We only have Baker and Taylor because that's the one we are using right now. But as I clicked it, and I did it pretty quickly, so I just wanted to do it again, it will take you right to Title Source 360. So the idea with the product designers behind this, the idea is that you can start in Blue Cloud Acquisitions and do everything sort of from within the starting point. Now, obviously, you don't have to. You can still bring in your bookmark, bring up your bookmark for Title Source 360 and start there. But they like to incorporate things so that you can do everything from within the starting point of Blue Cloud Acquisitions. So it'll take you right here. And of course, you could log in, build your cards, and do all of the things that you already do. I see a comment. I just want to check. Any time frame for the items needing development. I don't have, this was from Margaret Anderson. I don't have a specific timeline. That is something that we've been given estimates on before. It's definitely on the horizon. I can look up the roadmap and maybe put that in the notes if I have any more specific details, but I don't know off the top of my head what that timeline would be. And anyone else who might know in the room, just feel free to jump in, but I don't think we have an actual time frame set for that. Okay. So, although I want to say really quickly though too, I do know some of our libraries, we do have some libraries in existence in SWAN that only do EDI artifact. They've insisted with their vendors. And if you are a library that only does EDI, ordering and invoicing, I know that might be pretty rare, but I'm just saying, if you are a library that only does that, and you really only use Midwest Tape and Baker and Taylor, you could begin using this potentially, you know, as far as what the software has available to you, you could start using it tomorrow. So it works really well for the things that it has set so far. It's just that it does have some areas that we want to see developed before we can say, oh yes, it's fully ready for everybody. Okay, so that was access vendor portals. Then create orders here is just what it sounds like. You can create a manual order. Order number can be auto-generated or you can type it in. You know, we have firm order. You have all these fields to fill in. Note that you have to type all of the information in manually. So, you know, if I key in an ISBN here, it's not going to autofill the title for me. This is just sort of like a blank form here. And, you know, your vendor, your list price is just what everything looks like. And so you would fill in all your title info there. Distributions is pretty similar to what you would see in the order line segments in Symphony. So you have your institution, that's your library. You have your item template. That is the equivalent to a holding code. And then you have your budget. and your quantity. Your budget is your fund. So this is what it would look like to actually manually key in an order. You'll notice that you can manually key an order. Not yet an invoice, but the orders, yes. Let me hit cancel. You also have an option to import orders, and this is the equivalent to the 9XX or mark order loading in Symphony. So I'm going to click that. I wonder if I should make this a little bigger. Hope maybe that's better. Sorry, I should have done that in the beginning. So you can see these are some mark files that we have previously loaded, and the status is complete. So that's pretty nice. So this step takes the place of 2 reports in Symphony. It takes the place of the load bibs with order info report or bib order load, and it takes the place of the load flat order records report. So again, no waiting in queue. You download your mark file and you bring it up here. Just like with Symphony, there is setup on the vendor side. So just like when you first implemented a 9XX ordering within your library and you started doing that with a vendor, you had to configure your grids or accounts or whatever terms that your vendor uses in order to map your information to the correct 947 fields and subfields. In Blue Cloud Acquisitions, it uses the 970 and the 971. So it's slightly different, but that would be another step that you could take here. And I can tell you from Baker and Taylor's end, you can create a separate grid and just apply it. So you could still maintain your 947 information and then add that other, as long as you're assigning the correct grid, it will map appropriately. So these are some files that we've previously loaded. If I were to import a new file, if I had a new one, I would just click import new file, and it's really that easy. And you just locate it and you import. And it runs pretty quickly. Again, much nicer than Symphony in that way. And let me click one and show you, it says view imported orders. It'll take me right to the orders that were in that mark file. So you'll notice, just like I said before, that every single title is its own purchase order. That is something that we're awaiting development, but right now it works with Baker and Taylor, it works with Midwest Tape, and that's what it looks like. I also like that you get these breadcrumbs up top, so it shows you exactly where you are, and the back buttons work. So it's web interface, it's pretty user-friendly. Let me go back to this one more time. Show you one more thing. I'm just viewing imported orders really quickly. Okay, so this submit for approval button is actually the step that will create the on-order item for you in workflows. So if you're a library, and most of you are, that creates that on-order item so your patrons can collect holds. That would be the step that would set that up for you. And then send is actually going to be sending the orders to your vendor. Okay. I have a question here to switch from Workflows Act to BC Act. Does there have to be downtime or a pause of Act activities to plan for these vendor EDI artifact changes? That's a good question, Kelly. I would not think it would be a long downtime. I think it would be a matter of you possibly holding a couple days worth of orders before your vendor tells you, okay, we're ready to accept that artifact instead of EDI X12. So it really depends on your vendor and how quickly they could make that change.
Yeah, just to interject, I had
Thank you.
when we first sent these orders, the change in protocol wasn't something we were aware of, and so it was just a matter of telling our rep at Baker and Taylor that they could expect a different, and it was instantly they were able to accept that report. I mean that order. And in terms of the other things like the setting up of the grids, the setting up of the new mark fields that are going to come in. I mean, it was all stuff that you could probably cover in an hour if you're familiar with what you're doing in the vendor portals, and if you have a good rep. So yeah, it can be pretty quick. It's really just the training and the setup that would take time, but not a lot of time, and it has nothing to do with anything technical or within the system that would need any holding or any waiting.
I think that another thing that we'll want to double check with the vendors is back ordered items. So any items that were
Mm,
ordered with EDI as opposed to Edifact. I know that Baker and Taylor especially, they like to, you'll get in your shipment, you'll get things from lots of different purchase orders. So we'll have to make sure that they're also able to separate those.
right. And as long as it's as long as the invoice is sent in the correct protocol, I don't know if it matters the way the order was originally sent. But yeah, that would be something you'd want to definitely talk to your vendor about. And if our, or as Scott said, is if our experience is any indication, it's a pretty quick process for them to just sort of flip that over to the new protocol. So it shouldn't be too taxing. Anne Marie says, we use specific PO order numbers for our carts. How does single line purchase orders work with this situation? And it's exactly the same. You can still import a specific purchase order. It would map to a specific 970 or 971, just like it currently does with a 947. You're probably putting that in the 947 subfield O, and you would continue to be able to do that and set that on your vendor side. The only difference is that it would just be that one title in the purchase order. So you can't duplicate that purchase order number, so you'd have to figure out a way to possibly, increment a number or something to make it slightly different. Does that make sense? So you could still add a descriptive purchase order name or number, but it would have to be unique per title. So you might want to say, adult fiction September 2021 or something like that. Okay. Anne Marie says, yes, not sure how it will work for us. We'll need to think about this. Yep, and that's exactly why I'm introducing it. I want everybody to see it, think about it. And by the time that you are ready to think about moving toward it, they might have instituted multi-line purchase orders. So this is definitely something that I feel very confident that they are going to add these features. I just don't know the necessary timeline. And it might even be that it's just a 2021 issue and we're almost done with 2020. This has been a very long, interesting year, but it is actually almost over already. So we'll be talking again. Susanna asks if both workflows and BC Act do not talk to each other. How will libraries handle the funds for budget lines? I'm not totally sure I understand your question. The Blue Cloud Acquisitions has the ability to run reports, so you can reconcile against your budget lines, as does Symphony. So are you saying if you were working in a hybrid environment, how would you handle that? You would probably want to set up two different fund structures if you're using both at once, and that's just my guess, to make it clean. And then you'd have to, so say you have an adult fiction fund and you're ordering from both Blue Cloud Acquisitions with Baker and Taylor and Symphony with Ingram, you could order out of the same fund separately, of course, and then run the separate reports, and then you'd have to combine them. I can't think of a better way to do it. Can you, Vicki, with your budget
No,
background?
I'm kind of trying to figure that out. I think you do have to have two separate budgets, and then you'd have to reconcile them
Mm-hmm.
separately.
Yeah,
I mean, I
I think
think
that would be the only
technically,
way.
if one is starting to run over budget, I would think you could probably just go to the other budget and make that less and put separately, you would just have to take money away from the one budget and then add that money to the other one. But you
Right.
wouldn't be able to do it in just one interface.
And I should say too, I mean, as I've sort of been saying, or at least hinting at, the idea is that you would never have to use both at once. But
Right.
until all of the features are added, that's the reality of where we are just at this moment. So has anyone done a rollover in BCAC? How did it work? That's a great question. So we did do rollover as part of our pilot process program we did back last year. I don't know if anyone's in this meeting that was involved in that pilot? If you were, please feel free to speak up. I don't think we have anyone,
I
but
don't
if I'm
think
wrong,
so.
please jump in. But I did it as well, and it was really simple. It was really simple. It was straightforward. It was a matter of just checking boxes and clicking buttons, really, instead of running reports. It was very comparable to workflows, but quicker, just like most things. So, of course, we were just using test data, so there was less concern for reconciling things. So it might be, slightly different when you're actually working with your real budgets, but the process itself was very easy.
That's just numbers on a screen. It's not real money, Sam.
Yeah,
Your bookkeepers might feel a little different, but come on. And
sure,
Lucas has a really
he
good
does.
idea here too. So he says it would likely be easier to combine them if you leave one budget set to all $0. So you always have that total amount spent in the alternate system. So you don't have to do the math then. You could take and run your report in one of them and then just mark that as an expenditure in the other interface.
That's a good suggestion.
hmm
I like it.
You just have to be careful that you don't go over when you're looking at that, the one that you have set to 0.
Right. Yeah.
Although I think that a lot of you might agree that you pretty much have to crack the whip for your selectors toward the end of your fiscal cycle. I hear that from a lot of libraries that, okay, you still have this much left in your budget. Come on. I know we
That's
had
true.
to do that too, so.
It happens. All right. Our bookkeeping procedure is changing starting 2021, which makes it a bit tricky. Thankfully, I use Baker and Taylor and Midwest Tape. Great. So that was from Susanna. And I want to say too that the idea behind moving existing SWAN libraries to this product, we don't have a timeline. All we've said is 2021. Sometime in 2021, we'd like to do that. So this, just like the item type consolidation, we don't have you'll be moving on this date. You have to adopt this new software. We just want to show you where we are with it, be honest about the things that need improvement, and show excitement for the things that are there, because the things that are there are pretty cool. At least I think they are.
Oh, so I can take January 2nd off my schedule then?
Oh
For
no,
moving
that still stays
everyone?
on your schedule, just not on mine.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Okay. All right, so that is sort of what that is what the acquisitions ordering interface looks like. Approve orders would be if you had any orders that you needed to approve. And that just marks, yes, I do like this order. Yes, I am going to actually order it. And then send orders, just like there was a button on a previous screen, but that is sending via EDI. In the pilot program, we only had email available, so it's exciting that Edifact is available. And I need to be using the correct terms. It's Edifact, not EDI. Amy Weiss says, I would probably do this at the start of a fiscal year since the two don't work together. Yep. I think anytime you make any big acquisitions changes corresponding to your fiscal is smart. I agree with you. Last thing you want to do is have to at rollover contend with two different systems. Okay, so that is ordering. That was the default screen, but of course we also have invoicing, we have receiving, we have reports, and we have selections. Selections are selection lists. I don't know that anyone is really using selection lists in SWAN, but this is another option that you can use in Blue Cloud Acquisitions, just like you could if you wanted to in Symphony. We don't have any invoices available as yet, but it looks very similar to the ordering screen. This is the view of the interface here, and you can import invoices, which would be receiving them via the Edifact, or approve them. And receiving, again, going to look very similar. You can just scan your titles by the ISBN or UPC, etc.
It's so empty, the screen, compared to what we're used to
I
seeing.
know. It is. It is. And
Can you
report.
just, sorry, can you display orders that have been sent?
You can. Yeah, go back here. Send. Okay. This is an order that is to be sent. I meant to show this earlier, so I just wanted to show you. This is one that is approved that hasn't yet been sent. So this is what it might look like. But to see ones that had been sent, if you go to, most likely you will have imported the orders. So these are actually orders that were sent. There are other ways to look them up with an advanced search as well, but I don't have many orders in the system, so I don't really have a great way to display that. But another thing you can do also is you can always export the order data, which opens in Excel. And of course, before you would even begin to be using this product, you would get training. We're currently working on building documentation as part of our, or we're about to build documentation as part of our pilot program too, or not pilot, our account with Baker and Taylor. So all of that will definitely be available to you and help support you in using the new product.
So this order that you placed, did you create an on-order item in Symphony for it?
I think we did.
Sorry,
Not 100%
didn't mean
sure.
to.
We did.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so
Thank you.
thanks, Scott. So we likely saw that SWS actually had an order for this item.
Right.
So that's something to keep an eye out for. If you do see that, if you see an on-order item in Symphony for SWAN, you know that we placed it through BCAC. And you don't
Yep,
usually see them
exactly.
from us, so it wasn't a mistake. You don't have to let us
Yeah.
know that, hey, you're muddying things up. It was meant to be there.
Right, you will be seeing on-order items for SWS in addition to those fully cataloged ones that will be showing up at a library near you. Amory asks, can selectors create carts, i.e. 200s, hotfix, reserves, and then attach a fund to the entire list? Yes, you can set that budget or fund per purchase order title, so yes. That would be something that you would want to set. I'm assuming you would want to be using Edifact, and yeah, that would just be something that just like you do now, it would map based on how you have your vendor configuration set up. And that looks, yeah, something like this. So this is our budget. We have SWS Adult Popular. That's just the name of our fund or budget, as Blue Cloud Acquisitions calls it. And speaking of, let me go to acquisitions and fund accounts to show you what that looks like. So just like if you were a library new to Symphony, your first step would be to set up your fund hierarchy and set up your vendor accounts before you can begin ordering, of course. And Blue Cloud Acquisitions uses a primary account and then child counts or, subsequent counts within that. What's kind of nice is Amy asked about rollover earlier. When you roll over, so say I could have 50 accounts under here, and this SWS primary is just, think of it like this is all the money your library has this year. This is your huge bucket, and you're going to divide it up based on the funds beneath it. So we just have these two little funds because we only have 2 accounts, but you would have something like that. When you roll over, all you have to do when you're running that report is just check this primary. You don't have to check all of these individual funds. So it's really quick. So that's what the fund structure could look like. You can see that we have some things encumbered, nothing yet expended because we haven't invoiced anything yet or paid it.
And just bear in mind that these budget numbers are totally made up for testing purposes.
Oh,
So don't
100%,
run off
yeah.
saying, "Oh, they're spending $2,000 on cookbooks." It's not like that.
No. Yeah. For us, it really is just numbers on the screen. For you, it might be different. And then just like the fund accounts, you of course would have your vendors, and you would have, you know, as many vendors as you want. We just have Baker and Taylor. Kelly asks, is adding non-title invoices a feature already available? We do a lot of those. And the answer is no, because we don't have manual invoicing yet. Once there is, I expect we did have a call with Mike Hilmo, the product lead, and we said that we would want the manual invoices, and then we also wanted the ability to link them directly to a fund or budget instead of an order. And so they are aware that that is something we need and want. You're welcome, Kelly.
And that's definitely a very popular feature.
Yeah,
that we,
it's important.
yes.
And this, I think, was one of the biggest benefits with us taking part in that phase 3 pilot. We really had our voice heard. They're very well aware of us. They're well aware of our size, our needs, and we've made sure to stay vocal.
And they've listened to us too, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. They've been great to work
definitely,
with.
It's not going on deaf ears.
No, it isn't, which is it's a great feeling, because we all know what it's like to work with someone who maybe your voice isn't heard, but that's not the case here. We're definitely heard, they're definitely listening, and they're making strides in the right direction.
Can you modify invoices?
Can you modify invoices? That's a great question. I don't know if we can actually.
The invoice
Do
bit
you
is
know?
sort of the last phase of
Yeah.
our deep dive that we're doing right now. The invoice just came to us, so we haven't actually brought it in here to do testing on where it stands now, especially with invoices gotten through EDI. So we'll have an answer to that pretty soon, but not today, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to misspeak. And I don't remember if we did that as part of the pilot, and they've done a lot of development since then, so I don't want to say the wrong thing. But we will, as Scott said, have an answer for you soon.
And what about orders?
Modifying
After they've
orders?
been
Yes.
sent.
You can
After
definitely
they've been
modify
sent, you can still modify them?
Let's see.
I'm thinking of like adding notes or something to it.
This would be something that's already sent.
Yeah, looks like
Yeah,
it.
I don't see why you couldn't.
Your save button became active.
Mm-hmm.
I would think you'd probably want to make sure that you don't change anything with the order number, though, because when your Edifact invoice comes
Right.
over, you don't want to, it might not be able to link up to it.
Right. I agree. But notes you asked for specifically under the distributions, if you'll notice, I clicked on this expand entries with notes, and text box appeared. So I could trade note and save. And I don't think that would probably impact anything with that effect, so that should be fine. But I'm gonna not save it just because these are our actual orders. I don't want to accidentally add a note that we don't intend to add.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions on Blue Cloud acquisitions? Or comments or anything? I'm glad there have been a lot of questions, and clearly people are thinking about it and interested in it. Hopefully this was helpful to just see what it looks like. Here's some information. I can tell you it's been fun to play library, actually order things. It's been a
It's been
while
a
since
long
I've been in tech
time.
services. Yep. Okay. Well, feel free to continue to ask questions as you think of them. Our next step is open discussion. I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen. Do we want to take a quick break? How do you all feel? Or do you want to just go right into open discussion?
And before we go into open discussion, I wanted to show the rollover reports that that I was talking about, but we can do that after
Oh,
a break if you guys want to take a break.
let's take a 5 minute.
Okay,
Let's come back in 5 minutes. So it'll be, let's say we'll come back right at 10:50.
sounds like a plan.
All right.
I will pause the
See you all in a
recording.
little bit.
Okay, we're at 10:50. I hope everyone had a wonderful break. And I am going to go ahead and share my screen. If it will do it. There we go. Okay, the rollover report that I was talking about that you may have to run multiple times. I wanted to show you what it is exactly you're going to need to adjust. So we have our old fiscal cycle here when we're doing our rollover. The order selection, it's going to be your library, and you're not going to change anything with this. This is the tab that you're going to have to adjust. So if you have run your cleanup reports and you know that you have orders that you've received, but they need to be rolled over to the next fiscal cycle so you can pay them from within there and they can be included on those invoices that are going to be created in the new system, in the new fiscal cycle. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to remove this 0 from here. So in this way, anything that's been received, but it hasn't been invoiced yet, it hasn't been paid, and it hasn't been loaded, then these orders will roll over as well. And then when you are paying your invoice, when you've got your EDI invoice, you'll be able to bring in the correct order. What's happening with the old ones is when you have that blank line on your invoice and you click on the link button, that is what is, when you search for that order, I know that some libraries actually had an issue where they had both orders in there, and it's because they had rolled over without this setting, and we didn't know that, so we had to go back and remove those old orders for them. But that would be a way that you could end up choosing the wrong order to put in there. But if you haven't rolled that over, and when you click on that link button and you search for your order for the title for the invoice, then that is, if you see the old fiscal cycle, once you bring it into the invoice, then that's how you know that you need to do something with that order and roll it over before you can finish that invoice, if that makes sense. And hopefully I didn't put everyone to sleep, that you were able to wake up after that, after the break. So we will work with you on this, and I'm going to be updating the documentation as well. It should be complete well before you're doing your rollover for January, because what we have in the documentation right now is to have, let me bring that here. And it's nice and slow for me. And hasn't updated. Okay, so now you can see it. So when we go to the documentation for acquisitions and we look at what's here for rollover, we do talk about going through and just making sure that you have all of your things together. It's rolling over your vendors and then your fund cycles. And then here's your basic order. So this is the report we were just in, and those are those fields. So this is by default that's what is in your report right now. But again, you might have to run this multiple times just so that you can take care of any orders that were received and need to be rolled over. They just weren't invoiced or paid or loaded. So this is where I'll be updating the documentation to show you that if you have orders that need to be rolled over that have been received but nothing else, that's how you would have to run that report. Is there anything else with the rollover issue and the remove fiscal cycle issue that you'd like me to show? Now that I'm not running the presentation, it's easier for me to share.
I think it was just so clear, Vicki, that no one has any questions.
Ah, I see. Yeah, I know it took me a while. So you guys are much more on top of it than I am. Okay, then so we will go into our discussion then, and that will our open discussion. I wanted to kind of start this with a question for everyone. We recently worked with a library who started an EDI process with a new vendor, and there ended up being a lot of back and forth between the vendor and the library, and we were called in to assist with it, just trying to make sure that everything got set up correctly. And it did seem to take a while with the vendor. So I'm just wondering if anyone else out there, not necessarily new vendors, but have you had any issues recently where you've had to do a lot of, had to have a lot of discussion with your vendors with EDI issues? And again, feel free to unmute your mic and let us know, or to type in the chat. Okay, Brittany is saying when they went EDI, they had a lot of back and forth with them, and they also brought us into this discussion. And that's good. What we want to remind everyone that we're here for you, and a lot of the libraries need to be configured the same way with the vendors, and we know what most of those settings are, so please feel free to reach out to us. And we are definitely very happy to work with the vendor, even directly if you want. So we want to make that any kind of change or move to EDI as seamless as possible for you. And we don't want you to become frustrated with it, because it is such a wonderful tool to use once it's set up and working. So has anyone else?
At Woodridge, we recently added Ingram for EDI ordering. And I don't remember too much back and forth. We did have a little tweaking, but I don't think it was that bad.
Mhm. And if you don't think it was that bad, it probably wasn't, because you really remember the really bad ones, don't you? Oh, I agree, Anne Marie. Jenny is amazing there at Ingram. And every time I speak with her, I end up speaking like her. For some reason, I grab that southern drawl and it just attaches. So it's nice
As
that we.
someone that used to share an office with you, I can attest to that. Sorry to interrupt your actual constructive
No.
comment.
Oh, I don't know how constructive it would have been, but yes, see, poor Sam. Working from home, I'm sure, has made Crystal and Sam very appreciative of not having to share an office with me as much as we did before. I miss them, but I'm sure they don't miss my switch to the drawl. And I swear it's not on purpose. And I'm not making fun of her. It just comes in naturally. So it is nice to see that there are good experiences as well as the bad ones. And I think that a lot of times it can be just different terminologies. We call it one thing, they're calling it another. And the vendor may have something that they have from Symphony that shows that this needs to be ABC, but in SWAN it actually needs to be XYZ. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out to us. We won't yell at you. I I won't, I promise. I've made myself stop yelling at people. So, okay, really, my boss made me stop yelling at people. But um, so if we don't have anything else about EDI, what would you guys like to discuss? Let's see, at a meeting I was at yesterday, they talked about discussing whales, maybe, or something. Anybody want to talk about whales? Nobody talked about whales yesterday, though. So I was kind of disappointed.
Whale's the animal?
I'm assuming.
Okay. Come on, Vicky, you know you want to bust into one of your whale songs.
Another reason Sam is happy to work from home instead of in the office with me. There were some positive points to working from home, huh?
Oh, you know I miss you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she completely sounded like she meant that too, didn't she, everyone? Are all of you
Okay.
back? I did want to, oh, we do have a
Mm,
question, but
we
I did
do.
want to ask something else. But let's see. Anne Marie says, how will Blue Cloud Act training be conducted with each library when the time comes to switch over?
That's a good question. Since we haven't done it yet, I don't think we have, that all wrinkled out yet, but I would imagine it would be pretty similar to when a library is onboarded with acquisitions and Symphony right now. We'd meet with you, we would arrange the training that's needed, go through whether it be digital like this or in person if the world changes, and help you work with your vendors and do all of the same things we would do if you were brand new.
Yes, Mary, we are still working
You're welcome.
remotely.
We are.
We're very lucky, and I think we all realize just how lucky we are.
Definitely.
And the fact that you had to ask if we're still working remotely shows that our system works.
Yeah, exactly. Very true. We're very fortunate to have these tools available so that we can still host these meetings and chat with you all. Mary says we are back in the library for the most part.
That was going to be what my question was. How are you all dealing with working in the library? I know we've seen a lot of staff changes, a lot of retiring, staff leaving libraries, some of it due to COVID. And I just hope that you're all doing well out there in the libraries. Maybe they're just waiting for us to stop recording so they can really
That's
let
true.
it fly.
Anne Marie says it's nice to be back in the building. Also like the option of working from home when needed. Yeah, it's nice to have a hybrid schedule and have that option opened up for you. Mary says masks, hand washing, distancing, and then just working as usual. And Woodridge is back to normal as we can be.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds pretty right on, Amy.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if no one has any other questions, we could stop that recording and see if anyone has anything they'd like to share once the recording has stopped.
Going once, twice. Okay, we'll stop the recording.